We are on a mission to save and revitalize independent pharmacy.
On the Catalyst Pharmacy podcast, you'll get actionable business advice.
Hear stories from industry leaders.
And share a laugh or two with us.
Fuel your passion for pharmacy.
One conversation at a time.
4,
3,
2,
1. Ignition.
Welcome to the Catalyst Pharmacy podcast. I'm your host, Mark Bivins, Vice President of Sales for Pioneer X. And today I'm here with Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh Howland, Senior Vice President of Clinical Strategy and Development for Pioneer X.
Today we're here with Victoria Hennessey, owner of Community Pharmacy of Springdale. So glad you're here. You're one of the Arkansas alums now on the show.
Yeah.
So up there with some high flying people.
Like, let's see. I've talked to Scott Pace. I've talked to Megan Smith. I'm just trying to learn from them. Just take everything you can from people who have already been through it and just learn.
I know.
I mean, the cool part is if you get to do it after them, you get to figure out what they made a mistake on and not do that.
You know, Arkansas Pharmacy is really collaborative, and for the most part, everybody's really friendly. And like, you know, if I call Scott, I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. He's like, well, don't do this.
He's like, I learned the hard way here.
Way, whatever. And it's really great to have those mentors. Scott was, he came and spoke when I was in pharmacy school, and I just remember being like all in, like I got to listen to everything, catch every word this guy's got to say. And, you know, there's just so many pharmacists like that in Arkansas. I feel like I'm just learning from the best.
You really are. And you're one of the best. You're also so for people who don't know, she's Victoria Hennessey is also the lead luminary for CPESN Arkansas. Second lead.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll edit that out.
We'll edit that out. We can fix that. Vice chair. But one of the lead luminaries there in Arkansas for the CPESN efforts. And one of the, you were like all in. So we'll go back to like how you got started as an entrepreneur later, but like you were one of the few people that was kind of all in on vaccinating right at the beginning.
I joke and say, you know, my husband and I had not been owners for very long. We had just purchased the drugstore in July of 2020, and
great time to buy a store, by the way.
I know. We'll talk about that later. Yeah.
I remember coming home and being like, hey, there's an opportunity to be a vaccine provider. And, you know, I know this is going to be different than any other vaccine we give, but we give other vaccines. So why wouldn't we just give this one, you know? So, you know, I think we need to talk about it. I think it's going to require a little more work. And, you know, so we had what at the time was the most realistic conversation about, okay, what do the next 6-9 months look like if we take this on? What I didn't know was that we were going to be one of very few vaccine providers in the area. So, you know, I kind of thought, oh, all the doctor's offices will have it. We'll have it. You know, pharmacies throughout the state will have it. I didn't realize we were going to be like one of 12 locations in a county of nearly 300,000 people to be given it. So yeah, at some point it was like, yes, we're going to take this on and we're going to do this because it's the right thing for the community. Had no idea how we were going to get paid or how we were going to really even be able to workflow it. But there were too many yeses. There were no nos, you know, and you just go with it and you figure it out as you go. And, you know, could I look back and say we made mistakes? Yeah, of course, you know, but the answer was never, no, we can't. We just have to find a way to do it. And it's been a long road for sure.
So this time next year in wave 37 of COVID,
Wave 37.
what would you do different about your vaccines?
Well, I will call Pioneer first and say, hey, I need to be able to build these on site or data enter these on site. We were a long time before we got a VPN, and it was like, why didn't I connect with other pharmacy owners and say, how are you doing it? I mean, I did, but not so much it was like, okay, the data entry, we just have to get it to the registry as soon as possible. But in terms of billing and all that, we were really late to the game in terms of getting that process going. We have a large staff for one pharmacy, but we have such a small staff that could be allocated to that movement. So at one point, like I have one of my technicians, she's, vaccines have kind of become her job. It was not our plan, but that's how it's ended up. And at one point, I think she was doing our jot forms. She was checking patients in. She was helping people fill out consent forms. She was making sure we had all our supply. She was literally doing every job except for vaccinating at the time, because technicians weren't able to vaccinate at the time. And as soon as that became available, she was like, I'll do that too.
Oh, wow. You really had someone step up then.
So, I think looking back, you're real hesitant, especially as a new owner, to go, well, we need to hire, hiring somebody when you don't know what the payment model is, if you can afford to pay them, that's really scary. So I think now, looking back on it, I can have more confidence in that it'll work itself out. Let's get the staff and support we need. But we were very, very fortunate with the partnership we had with the local church. They provided a lot of volunteers, and they were kind of repeat volunteers.
Really?
So it wasn't like we had to go through the whole process. And, really by the end, our 2-day-a-week clinics were running like 900 people through in a day to get vaccines.
Per day? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, we did 2 large clinics per day, and they ran anywhere from per week, 2 large clinics per week at the Family Life Center at the First United Methodist Church in Springdale, Arkansas. And we were running anywhere between 500 and 900 vaccines in a day. It was really a well-oiled machine.
I know, it sounds like it.
Like somebody said, we're the Chick-Fil-A of vaccines, and I was like, hands down, best compliment I could ever get.
I'll take that all day. Yeah, no kidding.
No, you never want to be in pharmacy. You really don't want to be compared to a fast food. But if we're going to be compared to one, Chick-fil-A.
Well, especially one whose drive-through game is the best drive-through game in town.
I'm still working on that. That seems to just be an ever-going issue, even after we open the lobby. But yeah, the vaccines were really flowing well.
And I forget, you're in Northwest Arkansas then.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I live in Fayetteville. Our pharmacy's in Springdale, which is about 10, 15 miles north of Fayetteville.
Gotcha. Yeah. I kind of associate Arkansas with, if it's not Little Rock or Fayetteville / Bentonville, I don't have any concept of where it's at.
I'm smack dab in the middle between Bentonville and Fayetteville. So.
Well, man, that's, and what about, so present state, probably not near what you're looking at now. And you've learned how to kind of just take it all into the pharmacy itself. Did you still have to get more space and expand a little bit, or what'd you end up doing there?
Just being really creative. Really. Our lobby was still closed. Our area was just still really high caseload, low vaccination rate. So our lobby was still closed when we decided to stop doing the major large clinics. We were seeing demand really drop off about that May, June period, where everybody's like, okay, we're still not really well vaccinated, but I can't send an entire staff over for an entire day to maybe do 100 vaccines. So we got to figure out how to get back to the pharmacy and do this and incorporate it into our regular business, So we came back to the pharmacy and we did walk-ins only. And basically half of my lobby became our vaccine clinic / waiting area. Okay. We have one patient room, which was originally a prescription file room. That's where all those, like, you open the door and you're like, oh, I can't even go in there because there's just prescription files, boxes everywhere. We ended up kind of like going through all that, and clearing that room out, making it a, clinical room so we can do vaccines. Mostly that's what it was originally for. And we were doing that before COVID vaccines came across, because I did recognize we had a pretty big opportunity with vaccines outside of, before COVID came along. So we utilize that room, and we have, a check-in desk, and, try to keep it as separate as we could from the regular pharmacy workflow. So that's, and we're still doing that today. We haven't officially made it to an appointment-based model for vaccines, but we're headed there.
Really?
Nice. So it's interesting. You went the exact opposite direction that most pharmacies we talked to went which was they were like appointments only, no walk-ins, and you went the other way. So if you did that again, a pretty
diverse patient population, and appointments aren't always best. And we already had a lot of vaccine hesitancy and barriers in our area, so going straight to appointments just didn't seem like it was going to be the right thing for our patients.
I can see you're almost like putting up another barrier then, almost in a way, to a degree, right? Especially for someone maybe not tech savvy or something like that. It's almost introducing another filter for them to try to pass through.
For sure. And we were getting a lot of patients who were being, required, they had to get it for their job. And, that you just kind of got to catch those people when you can. Yeah. And so, now we're at the point where we want to get started on COVID testing. We haven't done that, haven't had the capacity to do that. So we're getting ready to do that. And I was like, well, we're going to have to get a little more predictability in here. Yeah. So we're going to do set up appointments for about 2/3 of what we do a day on average for vaccines, and leave the other third for walk-in availability that we can just plug on and see how that goes. Every time you try to control something like that, that's been previously pretty uncontrolled. Right. There's a lot of pushback,
Right. Well, I'm a big fan of the appointment-based model for pharmacy, and yet when I had to go get my COVID booster, I was like, man, I wish I could just walk in.
Right. When you became a consumer.
Yeah, I was a consumer. I was like, this is so inconvenient.
You mentioned here in a second, like just kind of talking through hesitancy. What's your approach to some of that?
It's patient specific.
Yeah.
It's patient specific because everybody, you can do a study and decide what are, the top reasons for vaccine hesitancy. That's great. Like we can all prepare for that. But I think when you really sit down and take the time to listen to a patient, and just, even if their fears are just completely irrational to you as a clinician, you're just like, how did you get here besides TikTok? Like, how did you get here? You have to listen, and you have to listen with you have to have listening eyes when you listen to them, like not just waiting for them to stop talking so you can say the next thing that's going to debunk whatever they said.
Right.
Having that empathy, really thinking, wow, if I didn't know better than that, that would really prevent me from getting this vaccine or whatever. I think that's part of it, just really having those individual conversations and developing a relationship. I have had some patients that I could not get them there in the first conversation. But if you can leave them with something, think on this and come back. And, I don't know how many of those have actually come back, but I would say most of the time we do talk them into getting the vaccine, and it has to feel important to them, and whatever their hesitancy is, you have to acknowledge it and not treat them like a group of people who believe in this particular myth.
I gotcha. Yeah. You have a population there that's fairly unique too, right?
Yeah, we have we have a lot of the Latinx community in Springdale, but we also have a really high population of Pacific Islander people, and specifically Marshallese. And a lot to go, what did you say?
We had that exact same.
We were talking about that before we got on with you, because what Madison,
do your homework?
No, Madison did homework with you, and then I did homework afterwards, and I was like, whoa, I didn't know there was that many Marshallese people there in Springdale.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's like the Northwest Arkansas has the largest population, if this is still correct.
It is correct
in the United States. And we do try. I have 2 employees who speak Marshallese, and it's different than Spanish. I can speak enough Spanish to get myself in trouble. I can listen and try to pick up on context clues, but Marshallese is just a very difficult language to learn. And so, I rely extreme amounts on my 2 staff members to help with that particular population. And, vaccine hesitancy is a concern, but I would say the biggest concern when reaching that population is getting information to them in a timely manner that is in their preferred language.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
You can go anywhere, like Google Translate doesn't have Marshallese. There's not there wasn't an EUA in fact sheet in Marshallese, know, and it's really tough. We have one physician here, primary care physician that I've worked with. He's one of two in the United States that are Marshallese physicians.
Wow.
And we're very fortunate to have him, and I've worked with him a lot, and we work together to try to reach that particular population. But I remember when the Pfizer got approved down to age 12.
Okay.
I was approached by a community member who's a big advocate for the Marshallese community, and he said, I want to have a back to school event for this group of people. And at that time, I can't remember exactly when Pfizer got the approval for down to age 12, but it had been a while.
Okay.
And I remember being like, wow, we're not any better at this than we were when COVID first came out, and COVID really wrecked their community. It impacted their community just significantly.
Okay.
And I thought, wow, and I said, why are we just now waiting? Like, why just now? It seems like we're a little delayed in this. And then I'm thinking, well, I should have done something better. And he goes, they didn't know that their kids were eligible. I'm being told by parents they didn't know. And I was like, wow, it has been all over the news, and Northwest Arkansas community is very for the most part, pretty vaccine friendly.
Yeah. Pretty high percentage of population, at least where you're at anyways.
Fayetteville specifically. And it was just a wake up call to me. It's like, man, I've been embedded in this community for now 10 years. And, at what point are we going to start thinking about them first?
I see what you mean. And then to your point, like you said, now try to introduce an appointment-based model with, you know what I mean? You got a lot of barriers in front of that it doesn't lend itself to subjecting everybody to yet. Right. 'Cause it's just not there.
It kind of takes me back to when we talked to Rannon early on, and his pharmacy in Terrytown, they served a lot of disabled adults. So mental, they were in group homes and they were completely forgotten.
Yep.
And, we were like, man, we're doing such a good job patting ourselves on the back, vaccinating all over the place. And then there's these pockets who are just wholly forgotten. And that when they pop up, you're like, oh man.
Yeah. We went to a few places like that. We went to a low income senior citizen community, not assisted living. I don't really know exactly how to classify this particular group of individuals, but I remember when the property manager reached out, and it was like, oh my gosh, she was like, I will rent a bus and I will load them up and bring them to you if you will just vaccinate them. And I was like, completely unnecessary. I will come to you. I just didn't know you existed. So I will come to you, and me and two interns, and, we just went and took care of their community. And the reaction was just like, wow, y'all will come on site. And that's what I learned. I think looking back on the whole process, your pharmacy is so far beyond your four walls. Mm-hmm. If you can get out in the community and serve in those ways that no one else is, there's extreme value in that.
Yeah, that's big. It echoes too. And you end up meeting people, like you said, that you didn't know, or people that you should know, right? And I know a lot of people come on here, all have relationships now with either some type of public health person, some type of FQHC that maybe, or some home or something like that they didn't used to talk to or didn't serve, and now they do.
Yeah. I remember Scott touched on our relationship. Scott Pace touched on our relationship with Dr. Dillahay with the Arkansas Department of Health. You know, she's a lead epidemiologist, and she has been the biggest champion for pharmacy throughout this. And we have such a great relationship with the Department of Health through this. It just makes you go, okay, now we all need to get in a room and we need to say, what do we do well and what do we need to do differently next time? You know, I think we all have a tendency to, not that COVID's over, COVID is not over,
right.
But when things start to settle down, you go, oh my gosh, I can take a breather. But really, before you do that, we should all get in a room and brainstorm on how could we have done this better? How do we reach the populations that it took so long to get to? You know, and we're all guilty of it. Like we all need, everybody I think in healthcare is a little overworked and exhausted and, you know, right now, but it would be good to do that.
You know, and same kind of for you guys, we sit back and think about, you know, we have this whole roadmap of features that we want to build that, you know, either pharmacies have asked for, or we're like, hey, this is where pharmacy needs to go. And a lot of what COVID kind of uncovered is that the things that we took for granted were the most important things, right? Like making drive-through really easy, being able to do data entry faster, you know, more things in bulk, right? And so, you know, that it's really important to, as it's starting to wind down, to start thinking about, in all likelihood, we'll have another pandemic. And if the faster we can do things right from the start, the shorter it will be. And hopefully the next one's not more dangerous than this one.
No, I hope not.
Right. So like, I mean, imagine if it had been like an Ebola style outbreak where you have like a 60 or 70% fatality rate, we would have a very different discussion at this point.
Yeah.
Right? So
yeah, it's really, if you think too much on it, it'll really shake you to your core to think about it. But, you know, I do want to praise you guys. I've known since maybe 2 or 3 weeks in to Pioneer that I made the right decision. And if that wasn't proven before, my God, the way that you guys responded to the vaccine rollout and making those features easier for us, like the only thing I just wish I had asked for a VPN instead of VPN a little sooner.
It sounds like we didn't sell it correctly, is what it sounds like, maybe to a degree. Maybe
I have a tendency to get told, you need to read the new features.
I get a tendency to tell you need to read what we give you. Right.
Yeah. But seriously, it has really changed the way that we input vaccines. And, you know, I remember when I did the upload of patients to HRSA, I had to call another pharmacy owner and say, hey, how do I do this?
What am I doing?
Like, you know, my husband knows Excel like inside and out. Like he can do anything in Excel, but he doesn't know Pioneer at all.
Right.
So we're about to have to start training him too. But I called this pharmacy owner and I'm like, can you help me with this? And I just watched him and I was like, wow, that was so much easier than I thought it was going to be. And, you know, I feel like that's kind of been the response here. Is like so many things are just, seems to be the workflow is getting easier. And I really appreciate y'all's dedication to that. And like I said, Josh, like, drive-through and data entry, like we assume those things are, you know, we're good in those areas. We need to focus on care planning and all that. But if you can, the easier you can make those other things, the more we can dive into the higher level care.
And I don't mean to be skipping around, but I wanted to go back to the Marshall Islands. I'm a random factoid fan. Do you know why they settled in Northwest Arkansas?
I would assume because we have a high, well, not high. I guess we have a lot of poultry plants. And so job opportunity was presented to them, but I'm not entirely sure. But I think that has a lot to do with it. You know, Tyson's headquartered in Springdale and several other poultry plants in this area.
Places who sell a lot to Walmart.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it just like it's one of those things that, like,
you were grasping on that.
Like,
you're like,
it's been worming in my head.
How did they end up in Arkansas?
How do you end up? Like, it's got to be like 12,000 miles, right? Like,
it's a lot. They're in between Hawaii and the Philippines.
Right.
Like, that's where they are. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
you're
a long way.
Yeah.
I live in the Marshall Islands. Arkansas sounds awesome.
Yeah. You know, like, that's good. So it's like you just pick the spot and Part of it too is your first few people get there, and then people follow the family, right? Or people follow their friends or whatever.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody probably ended up there by accident. Was like, hey, it's not bad here.
Yeah,
and then
it's pretty up there. Yeah, it's really pretty.
Yeah, it really is.
The cost of living is relatively low.
That's true.
There was job opportunity. I think that's probably they may have found that healthcare was easier to access at that time. I don't know. I know that when they first arrived, they were given Medicaid.
Right.
And then it got taken away for a while. Now it's reinstated. But, I think just ease of getting a job and setting up community.
Yeah, we were talking about that too. Like, New Braunfels, Texas, there's a really, really big German population. And you're like, how did you all end up here?
Right.
And a lot of it just leads to your first few.
Right. Well, it's very weird, like Central Texas. You've got New Braunfels, you've got a huge German population.
And Polish
in West,
down there by San Antonio.
And you've got West and they've got a Czech population and Polish. You're like, I don't understand how.
Yeah, you're like, how do all you?
And and we were talking. So like my grandma immigrated from Germany after World War II, and so I would always ask her like, why did you move from Frankfurt, Germany to Garland, Texas? And it was like, meh. It seemed like it was okay. I don't know.
Dairy factory? I don't know. I mean, I was like,
not to insult anybody listening that may or may not be from Garland, but there's really nothing there. Like, it's just a city.
You were there.
Yeah, and I'm not there anymore.
Yeah, no, that's true. All right. That's fun. My kids. So we can get back on track later, but my son, at least, and maybe yours aren't old enough yet. I have a 12-year-old son and a 17-year-old daughter, and they're almost FaceTime first sometimes, like with some of their friends, like literally that, like almost.
That's so weird
and it's,
to me.
Yeah, where I'm probably text first and my parents are very phone first, right? They're almost FaceTime first. Like,
I don't know, maybe it's a small town girl in me. I'm still phone first.
Yeah.
I do not want to sit and text you forever. I just want to call and figure out the answer to my question and move on.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I told you the story. Like, I bought my daughter like this little Minnie Mouse phone, and it's like it's a old phone, right? Like it has a cord and everything on it.
Like the rotary.
Yeah.
The rotary.
And so it's obviously a toy. You hit the button, it plays the song, but like, she doesn't answer it and put the phone up to her ear. She answers it and puts the phone in front of her like it's FaceTime. And I was like,
do that too. Yeah.
So
my kids do that too.
My kids never ever had to put a phone up to her ear.
It's funny because Daniel and I were driving to Little Rock. That's where he's from. And we were driving to Little Rock, and we had, I don't know if we were getting ready to go on vacation, like right after, the big clinics slow down or what. I think we're driving there to maybe drop the kids off with his parents. And we were playing 90s country.
Oh, nice.
And Travis Tritt's song comes on, like, here's a quarter.
Right.
Someone who cares. And I just, at some point in the song, I just looked over him and I was like, oh my God, Daniel. And he goes, what? I said, if Lindley's listening, we're going to have to explain why the woman needed a quarter.
Right. They like no idea what's going on. Like,
that old.
Why would someone need a quarter?
Well, I mean, then you're going to have to explain what a payphone is.
Right.
There is still a working payphone in Northwest Arkansas, in like Prairie Grove somewhere. I've never been, but I keep meaning to go. Maybe that'll be the moment. I'll take her there and I'll explain the song and we can move on with our lives. I don't know.
Yeah. At least now with at least in the, where my kids are in demographic, they get exposed to things like Stranger Things or things like that have some like 80s or 90s themes to it. So they like, my kid was watching a movie with me the other day, and there was literally the guy hung up the payphone. He's like, what is that? He's like, what is he talking on, dude?
Why did he just slam that phone into the wall?
Right.
I kind of want to see how the Matrix, like the fourth Matrix that's about to come out, how are they going to solve for getting out of the Matrix? Because you used to have to use the phone banks.
That's true. You used to have to cord the phone.
That's not going to happen anymore.
Right. That's true.
Yeah, no. It's probably it's going to blow our mind either way, I'm sure.
Oh, hey, we fact checked it on like what brought on the kind of the 12,000 Marshallese people.
Oh yeah.
And so you're right. So it was apparently she said basically
poultry farm or poultry factories.
A lot of a combination of a lot of factory jobs available, affordable housing, and I think good education, I think is what it was. And it was kind of That's kind of what it was.
I mean, that's
in the 80s.
Springdale.
Mm-hmm.
That's Springdale.
Yeah.
I mean, Springdale is manufacturing. It's very blue collar,
right.
Town. Even now that it's, really highly populated town, it's still very much kind of the home of the manufacturing process.
Yeah. So let's go. So usually we go the other way first, but I want to get into like how you got started. You're also, for what I didn't say earlier, you are the award. You won the 2020 Distinguished Young Pharmacist Award by Arkansas Pharmacy Association. So that also another reason why you're here. But how'd you get going into one pharmacy and then to you're still fairly young for one of the successful owners I get to meet and get to talk to. So how'd you get into this?
Well, I moved up to Northwest Arkansas. First of all, thank you for calling me young. That's the best part of that award. Like, I'm going to cling to that for the rest of my life.
That one's going. No. Yeah. All right. I hear you. It's on the desk.
I love it when people say that. That's like the only thing I hear is young. I'm like, oh yes.
So I love that. I'm so young.
Yeah. Although I've aged probably 10 years since I got an award in 2020. But no, I moved to Northwest Arkansas. Actually, my class at UAMS that moved up here to Fayetteville was the first satellite class for UAMS. Okay. So there's a satellite campus here. And we were kind of the guinea pigs. And I had worked for a small grocery store chain, and not had like a terrible experience. It was a fine job, but there were just some things that I saw that I was like, I don't really like that, or man, I hate that the pharmacist doesn't have more autonomy there, And so when I moved up here, I was like, I think I want to try independent pharmacy and see if that's something I want to do. And so I literally went to I Googled, this is back when, you had to Google and like figure out, you didn't have maybe I had Google on my phone. I don't think I did. But anyway, I had my list of pharmacies I was going to go to. And I also didn't know Northwest Arkansas at all. So kind of aimlessly driving around trying to find these pharmacies. And I went to every single one.
Okay.
That was listed to say, hey, I brought my resume. I'm business casual, ready to work, want to learn, and just not a really great response, I think by one pharmacy owner, I got told I don't help the school. And I'm like, not asking you to help the school. I'm asking if I can work for you for pay. Mostly experience. But I was just like, well, probably not a
this is start. When you were an intern at the time? Is that what you were? Yeah,
I was an intern.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't clarify that. I was an intern, and I went to a pharmacy where the owner it was a new startup, and the owner had graduated like 2 years. He was like 2 years ahead of me in school, and I had shadowed there for some of my hours, and he had just started. I went back to him and I was like, hey, I really want a job. Can I work here? And he was like, I can't even pay myself right now. I can't hire you. I would love to, but I can't. And he was really, really nice about it. But he's like, go see this pharmacy that's in the hospital in Springdale. Like, they don't advertise. You wouldn't know they were there. But they're, I hear that they're a really great pharmacy and great pharmacists to learn from. So I went, and he was right. Like, no, hardly any signage. Like, if you're not looking for it, you would not find it. And went in and introduced myself to the owner, and said, I'm looking for a job. I want to learn about independent pharmacy, and handed him my resume. And he was just real gruff. He just looked at it. He's like, yeah, I'm losing a technician in like a month, and I don't think I'm going to replace him. Said that right in front of the technician. I was like, okay. All right. Well, if you change your mind,
right.
You have my information. So yeah. Okay. And I walked off, and I remember leaving being so discouraged, incredibly discouraged. Called my dad. I'm like, I'm not going to get a chance to learn about independent pharmacy. Nobody's going to give me a chance. I've been to them all. And he was like, well, in my true dad fashion, he's like, well, take care of business. You got to get a job.
You got poultry. Like, okay. I mean, you got poultry. So,
yeah. I could have gone to poultry.
There's always the 3-letter chains.
Right. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah. So I ended up at one of the chains. The 3-letter wasn't here yet. Mm-hmm. So I went to the other one that typically resides across the street. And I remember when I walked in, like I'm small town, right? And I'm a people person. So I walked in and said, "Can I talk to the manager? Are they here?" Introduced myself, handed her my resume, and she was just like, "You got to apply online."
She's like, "What are you doing?"
I was like, "Well, I just want to, introduce myself." And I walked out and I cried the whole way home.
Oh man.
And I was like 22 years old and I just cried. And I was like, I'm going to have to go to another job probably one that I will like less.
Right.
Then I did my last one. And by 4:00 that day, the owner of the independent pharmacy in the hospital called. Oh. And he said, he just stated his name and he goes, "I've changed my mind." I was like, "Great. Awesome."
Okay. His technicians were probably like, "Dude, call her now."
It was Monday. It was a Monday. And he was like, "Well, why don't you come in next week and you can work all week and see if you like it. I can see if I like you, if you like me, and we can work together. And if the end of the week, if you don't like it or I don't like you, I'll just pay you and write you a letter of recommendation." And I was like,
"All right, win-win, I guess."
That's actually not bad.
Yeah,
I said, "Okay, but it's Monday. What time do you open tomorrow?" And so I just went in the next morning and I stayed. I mean, that was the summer we weren't in class. So I stayed open to close every day and I just loved it. I just learned everything that I wanted to learn. And I got to serve diverse populations. I come from a very, just non-diverse town. Right. And so I hadn't experienced caring for patients who didn't speak English. Yeah. And just seeing the way that this pharmacist and his wife is a family-owned business and how they really took care of the community regardless of anything. Like all the things you could discriminate against a person for, it just didn't matter. Mm-hmm. They took care of everybody. And no matter if they could pay or not, they figured out a way. Nobody left the drugstore without what they needed. And I had the time and there was never, nobody ever said, "Hey, you're taking too long to counsel," or you don't have time to open that glucometer and show somebody how to check their blood sugar. It was really incredible. And I went to work for him after school and we partnered with an FQHC. Okay. And the FQHC wanted us to move our store out of the hospital and move into the building where they reside. Okay. And he was like, "I'm not moving, but I'll send Victoria. She can open up a store down there."
Victoria.
I've been out of school 3 months and I was like, "What?" Like I'm barely learning to pharmacist by myself.
Right.
Like, what are you talking about? Right. And, I don't think that, the thought was that it would grow into what it is. But, it was one of those things. I don't know the answer, but you just say yes and you figure it out.
Right.
And they provided me a lot of support and I got to make mistakes and they didn't fire me for it. They just let me learn from them. And
cool.
It's been great. It's been a great relationship.
Very Richard Branson approach,
that's awesome.
Right? I think that's a Richard Branson quote. Someone gives you a really good opportunity and you're not sure how to do it. You just say yes.
That's how he founded Virgin, right? He sold seats on a plane he didn't own.
Right.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great story.
I'm a little bit too cautious for that kind of stuff, but yeah, it was, I'd call him for the first 6 months. I'd call him about everything. And he's like, one day he's just like, "Quit calling me." And I was like, "Why?" And he goes, "Because this is your store. You have to run it the way that you want to, and you're going to have to figure it out." And he'd tell me, I don't know all the answers. And I think that, I'm big on asking what other people, what do you do? How do you do it? Yeah. And learning from other people. That's why I love this podcast. Kind of feel like I was almost like, no, I can't be on the podcast. I can't take a spot from somebody I'll learn from.
Oh my goodness.
I don't have anything to contribute, but
that is not true at all, by the way. But anyway, I'm kidding. That's something different though. So usually there's not a lot of folks that say, "Hey, I'm going to open up a new pharmacy that is not just a kind of community pharmacy. It's right either subplanted in an FQHC or right next to it, but definitely very much a part of it." What did you learn in that aspect? What was different or unique about it?
Oh man, it was beautiful. So the spot we got was 500 square feet.
That's huge.
So so large.
So big.
And when I tell you that they enabled me to make a lot of mistakes. They gave me the plans and said, draw it.
Oh,
and
good.
I was like,
nice.
What? But it was really great because I also worked part-time. Like we contracted out my hours to the community clinic. I don't know if I'm supposed to the FQHC, in order for me to be part-time clinical pharmacist and see patients within the clinic because they really needed that. So, I think about 10 or 12 hours a week. I went over there and had a schedule of patients, and that was really great to see that aspect of it and to get to know the providers there.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned was relationships. I mean, again, it all goes back to relationships. Once I was able to, you just need one opportunity, really, when you're talking with physicians or nurse practitioners or physician's assistant, whoever the provider is, no matter what it is, be ready to try to answer their questions and solve their problems. And once you solve one, then you're in.
Yeah, you're a resource now.
And so, learning that aspect and seeing their pain points and how we could help solve them relatively easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy because a lot of the pain points that physicians and these primary care providers are having could be solved by a pharmacist pretty quickly. Or relatively easy, med adherence. Well, okay, is it that you can't afford it? Well, here, this is what's covered by your insurance, or we can get a coupon, or, it was that kind of stuff that's not really super clinical, or, they're not taking their metformin twice a day because they're sick at their stomach all the time.
Right,
and you change it to ER and they're like, oh my gosh, because they were getting ready to DC the drug. And you just solved a problem for them, and they get to keep the patient on metformin, which we know is good. So, I think that partnership was just beautiful in that way that they just say, Victoria, here's my patient, fix it, fix the issue.
Nice.
And after a while, that's kind of what it became. It kind of became that. And, obviously we wanted, everybody to fill their prescriptions with us, but really those two things were very separate. My pharmacy was very small, and the waiting area wasn't great, and we only had so much room for staff. So this FQHC sees 40,000 people a year. So that was not going to be their, go-to, but we wanted to make sure that, patients had access to a pharmacist who could sit down with them in the clinic, and that was great. That was really great.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of med management.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know if it was Ed or somebody I was talking to. I love the idea where you guys are going out and doing those types of things that pharmacists are best at. I might get some flack on this, but I'll say it anyway. When pharmacists keep pushing for prescriptive authority, I think it's silly, right? I didn't go to school to diagnose. I went to school to manage medications. And so when you're in those facilities, things that you spent 4 years getting a doctorate in, you can solve those problems, and they're trivial problems to you, and they're not to doctors and PEs and PAs because they got a semester of drugs. Right. So I don't want to be the guy who diagnoses and treats. I mean, there's some trivial things like strep. That's fine.
Sure. Something the machine can help.
I want to be the investigator.
When it's a public health issue, I think is where I kind of draw the line on that. Pharmacists are going to have prescriptive authority for oral contraceptives next year. And, that wasn't something that I really pushed for. And, but I wasn't against it. I was just kind of neutral about it. Obviously I want to practice at the top of my license. I want my pharmacist to practice at the top of their license. But, when thinking about that, it's we have the highest teen pregnancy rate in the country. So,
Arkansas specifically does?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I know. It's probably something I shouldn't tout on this podcast.
It's all right.
It's not something.
Well, I mean, you're not saying it as you're proud of it. You're saying it as a matter of fact.
It's a public health situation. And if we can help, just like with COVID, we did our part, or we're doing our part with vaccines and monoclonal antibodies testing. I think that that's great when you give pharmacists the ability to, you untie their hands and allow them to help in an area where it's really desperately needed. But I think you're right, Josh. I think that if the primary care providers could diagnose. We could review labs and medications and take it from there.
And manage, yeah.
It'd be a game changer with healthcare, but there's got to be a payment model for it, you know?
Right.
Yeah,
and it's really hard to get payers to pay for something that they just cannot. They still see us as the commodity, right? And it's so hard. Once you say pharmacy, they're like drug.
Yeah. Right.
Pills in a bottle.
You know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and usually it's how much less expensive can we get the drug? Like, and it's interesting where, you know, you start seeing like the vertical integration of a health system or a health plan owning a PBM. When they own a pharmacy, that's when I've got a problem with it. But joining medical and pharmacy together makes sense because you should be looking at total cost of care. Who cares how much you spend on metformin? It's stupid, right?
Yeah.
When you spend money on a renal transplant, different story, right? Like, it's just
and it's
bonkers.
really hard to separate those two. You know, I love, you know, I'm going to plug CPESN right now. But like going back to, you know, Joe, I'm sure that you guys have seen the slide where he shows the, you know, 100% pie and drug is 10% and all the medical spend is 90%. And, you know, if you can we can't forget about the 10% because I'll agree with Jeff, who was just on whose podcast just aired, like prescription is still the bulk of our business.
Right.
I mean, dispensing prescriptions. We're not at the point where you can say, okay, well, I'll give up a little of that for this. You're not going to put a sign on your door and says we're not going to accept any more prescriptions. Like you're just not going to do it. We have to find, we have to make sure that the payment model there is good, and we're, you know, at cost recovery plus. Like, I mean, I don't think you're right. Pharmacy benefit managers and insurance companies are going to see, well, what's the minimum dollar I can pay, or sometimes the minimum cents I can pay for this for this drug. We got to be able to be paid for that service. And I want to explore clinical options and get paid for those services that really utilize my degree and my expertise. But we can't forget about this other side. Yeah, you know. And
well, you know, and
it's just
one thing on top of that. The prescription is often the reason you have that patient in front of you. So if you completely decouple the prescription from the clinical service, you lose how frequently you're in front of that patient. So that's something that I think we kind of tend to lose sight of as well. All these clinical services that we can offer are only on the horizon because you see that person 12 times a year.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
That's kind of part of what I've heard you say before too, where it's like, that's also why when you decouple those, you see like call center MTM not work or really not be impactful, right? Because you're not standing in front of the patient 12 times a month.
Right.
Or 12 times a year. Sorry.
And that's funny you bring that up. I got a call from a vendor this week and saying that, you know, we've got this new clinical program and where when you have clinical opportunities, we'll just do them for you and make sure you get the payments. You don't lose the opportunity. And I said, absolutely not. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that we check box every single clinical opportunity that comes across. You know, it's really hard to make sure you're taking advantage of all of those, but they're not going to do it any better.
No,
You know, the reason you have those patients is because you've developed those relationships, and they don't want to hear from an outside call center. You know, so it's how do we continue to keep up this volume and doing these filling these prescriptions, you know, in the best way that we can, but also expand our staff. You know, the payment's got to be there to be able to hire, you know, and anytime you hire before you have the payment, that's just it's a huge risk. And we're somewhere caught in the middle right now.
Yes.
Yeah. You're kind of in that spot where, you know, when a pharmacy goes to implement MedSync for the first 25% of their patients that go on MedSync, it's more work for the pharmacy. It's a huge pain in the butt. And then you hit that critical part where you've got enough people on MedSync where it starts to free up a bunch of time. We're in that bucket right now where you've got enough clinical services on your plate where it's additive to your workload, not adding to your ability to, you know, add more people, add, you know, different processes, re-engineer your process. you're in that part right now where it's just really painful.
Yeah, for sure. We're at about 30% MedSync, and which I'm really proud of, because the particular community that we serve, it is difficult.
Right.
I'm not going to lie. It's very difficult, challenging. We just had a strategic planning meeting with our MedSync group. You know, my MedSync's totally out of workflow from, you know, we've got acute and non-acute workflow, and had a meeting with them. And, you know, I've got one coach who's like, you know, I think we're doing pretty well. And then I've got one coach who's like, hey, I got barriers. Like, I know where your vision is. I know you want to move to clinical MedSync and you want to do these enhanced services and really provide this next level care where we're helping patients manage their disease stage. I can't get them to answer the phone. So how are we going to, or when I answer the phone, I start asking, okay, well, you don't want your metformin this month? How come? You know, it's perceived as, oh, she's being nosy. Like, why does she need
you're kind of prying.
You know, like we have some major barriers and have to rethink kind of the way that we do MedSync in certain populations, because I've been to Mexico, been to everywhere I go outside the country, I have to go to the pharmacy, right? We have to see how everybody else does it. And when you go to like Mexico, you just walk in and say, this is what I want, and you leave with it. You know, for the most part.
Oh, wow.
And
except for the really fun stuff.
Okay. It's like,
I walked up and I was like, I'm not a diabetic, by the way, but I said, I'm going to need some insulin. You know, what's your best insulin? And the girl's like, well, we have all these. And, you know, there's no, like, it's just very much, it seems like just plug and play. Just whatever you want, you take, you know, it's different. And, you know, it may not be that way in every community, but the few places that I've been, that's how it is. And when I ask patients, you know, what has your past experience been? They're like, well, if my doctor tells me I'm going to be on lisinopril for the rest of my life, I don't need to go. But like the concept of going back to get labs drawn or whatever to get another prescription, it's like, why do I have to do that?
Right.
I have high blood pressure, you know, and like just explaining the concepts of like our prescription filling process is a challenge we have. And so MedSync, it's like when you're trying to grow, you also don't want your staff to be like banging their head into a wall because, oh, well, she wants me to grow this percentage or she wants me to have this many patients, but I'm spending days and days trying to track some of these patients down.
Right.
You know, they agreed to it when we first talked to him, but it's not fully there. So, you know, we're trying to like revisit that and figure out, okay, how do we change our process? Because I truly believe you have to meet the patient where they're at. You have to figure out, you know, does that mean our hours for MedSync are different? Calls are made between 12 and 8, like instead of 8 to 6 or 8 to 4, you know, when people are working. You know, you got to meet people where they are. And it'd be really great if the RX Local app was in Spanish. Just going to put that out there.
It is an issue in my queue.
It's in Josh's queue.
I know. I bring it up every time.
Now, it's funny. I was about to say we're in the process of rolling out some MedSync notifications where you can send them a notification. They go through and say, this is what I need. This is what I don't need. But that will not work for your Spanish or your Marshallese patients because those web pages are written in English.
Yeah. That's kind of been a thing. I would really love to utilize the app, you know, because I think they could respond to that on their time and, you know, still trying to figure out some of those things. But for the most part, you know, I think it's going to require a higher level of touch with the patient at the beginning. You know, maybe have a pharmacist come in and say, I'm going to meet with you. I'm going to explain MedSync and, you know, have their coach there to meet them, you know, and have that almost like a CMR, in-person CMR when we enroll them. So maybe that there's a better you know, you got that stickiness now.
Yeah.
Well, and so I've been in a couple of pharmacies that do something similar, and one of them is part of an ACO. And so similar to kind of your population, right? And they'll do kind of an induction phase of MedSync where the pharmacist will do the first one. And if it's a complicated patient, the pharmacist will stay on for 2 to 3 months. And if it's a simple one, then they'll transition it off. But everyone comes in and they get like kind of a full clinical review and then figure out what their goals are. And then they move it over, and, their patients are already part of an ACO, so they get more touches of like case management and things like that. But it does seem to help establish okay, this is important, and if they can be important and convenient, then it makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. We have a pharmacist that's going over and doing that role within the FQHC that I previously was in, and we're trying to make that different. Look at, okay, well, we didn't have success. We didn't have as much success as we wanted in the way that we were doing it before. So how do we transition this and make sure that these things are married? What we're doing in the clinic complements what we're doing in the pharmacy, and, all to improve adherence and improve, access to care for these patients. So yeah, we may be doing something very similar to that.
Cool.
That's super interesting. I don't want to close out before asking this, because you're fairly fresh in your buying journey, right? When you bought the pharmacy, you said back in 2020?
Yeah, July 2020.
Yeah. What kind of, because we do get some people that are like, hey, I think I'm starting one, or I think I'm going to buy one, or I'm trying to find, they'll listen to Jeff Harrell too, talk about like, hey, here's some creative ways to finance it. What was some of the stuff you learned about how to do it without getting anything into particulars too much? But I know you're a new owner ish.
Well, we can say young again.
Yeah, young again. We'll say young again. Say I was super young, youthful owner.
Well, I'll say when Jeff was talking about, there are a lot of owners who, especially with capital gains tax, taxes going up, that may want owner finance and to lower their tax limit, liability. I think that that's definitely something that young entrepreneurs should think on and contemplate. That's pretty much how we did it. So when he was saying that, I was like, oh, I did a good thing. Validation.
Right. Yes.
Not to say that that's right for everybody, but that was kind of the right path for us.
Okay. And the owner stayed involved?
Yeah. Yeah. He works 1 day a week. He covers Saturday, so I can watch cartoons with my kids.
Nice.
Or,
all right.
Catch up on work outside the pharmacy.
Yeah. Or yes. Or
it kind of just feels like work 24/7 for the past 2 years. But, he's still on, and him and his wife own it, and she works still at the pharmacy. So we've got a good relationship, and it just seems to work that way.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to see someone.
I'm just like, if I'm at a place where I'm about to retire, the 1 day a week I work is not going to be Saturday.
It's definitely our slowest day of the week. And I think, the Saturdays that I work, sometimes with him when we do clinic, like vaccine clinics, he doesn't administer vaccines. It kind of feels like the old days a little bit, okay. And the demographic of the store has changed a lot. And, a lot of the patients that used to go in and see him, they like to go in on Saturdays because they can, he has the time, more time.
And he's got time to spend with them. Yeah.
Our pharmacy is chaos, 24/7. You remember, you go back to that, we're in that hard place between, when we're building MedSync and whatever. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then, we're blessed to be able to have the constant influx of new patients through the partnership with the FQHC. And so it stays pretty busy, and there's a lot of people. Like, I've had other pharmacy owners who come in and they're like, oh my God, how many people do you have working here? And I'm like, a lot. I don't know. I lost count somewhere back. When you have 3 main languages being spoken in your pharmacy at any given time, you got to have people who speak those languages. And, until I can convince more of our Latina, or Marshallese Pacific Islander kiddos to go to pharmacy school, I got to have a lot of help. And so there's always a lot of people, and Saturdays seem to be kind of back to that old school feel sometimes.
I see.
Nice. That makes sense now.
Yeah.
I'm just like, man, if I could sleep in until like 9 o'clock on a Saturday, I would do it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm definitely not a morning person. I'm a night owl. So I could literally work the pharmacy from like 10 or 11 to like 10 or 11 at night.
Yeah.
That's like, that would be like my ideal schedule if I could.
I used to
just thinking about work.
Pre-kid and pre-being married, like working 2 to 10 was my favorite schedule.
Oh, I bet.
Kind of like a swingish shift kind of.
Yeah, like 2 p.m. to 10 p.m.
Yeah.
I could sleep till 11:45.
Yeah, I can't do that anymore. I wouldn't even know how.
Oh yeah, that's definitely out the door now. But
like we're at the age where the 3-year-old's standing at your bed and like you roll over, you're like, oh my gosh, where did you come from?
Yeah, that's the most disconcerting way.
Time.
Yeah, I woke up at 5 o'clock this morning that exact way. My daughter was like staring me in the face. She's like, "Daddy," I'm like,
very unsettling.
Isn't it crazy how they can be so loud?
I know.
But then be
like a ninja.
Stealth ninjas between the hours of like 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. to appear right in here 2 inches away from your face.
Yeah. After having stepped over 2 dogs.
Right. I didn't touch anything on the way up here, but man. The second you need to get on the phone. Whew, yeah. Have kids. Kids are great, everyone.
Yeah, I know we've talked a lot about kids. They're wonderful. We love them very much.
I love them more than anything.
I continue to gripe around
when you
kids.
Create a small version of yourself. You're like, oh man,
I know.
I don't know that I'd hang out with me.
Yeah, yes, I'm actively, Cohen, I love you, but I'm actively trying to not raise a D-bag. And so, he has these moments where I'm like, man, I think I might have ruined you a little bit, but okay. All right.
Man, I'm telling you, Matthew will just run right up to Lindley. She's 6 and he's 3 and he'll just run right up and like hit her in the back. She's like, she's like, Mom, what are you going to do? And I was just like, hit him back. I don't know. I'm winging it. You don't know that by now?
Right.
Yeah.
You're 6. You should have figured this out by now.
Well,
yes.
And we'll look back at this podcast in 20 years and realize that all 3 of us have messed up our kids in very specific and different ways.
Mostly positive. Probably.
I mean,
it's so funny. The more you like focus on not screwing them up, it's like almost.
Right. Well, it's funny.
Goes the other way.
For real.
My wife's actually going back to school to do a master's in family counseling, and like I learned a lot from reading her like weekly papers because I'll proofread them. Not for like.
For fun.
Active. No, I mean, she's
for like grammar and spell.
Yeah,
okay. Let's
I don't know.
Make sure she's doing it right or what?
Yeah, I'm like,
okay, all right, I got you.
Let me mansplain how you become a counselor.
I know, right? I was like,
no.
Jess would tell you to go to hell. But anyway.
More grammar and punctuation.
All right.
But like, one of the things that's kind of wild is even if you do an amazing job, your kid's going to have like that one neuroses that just pops there, right? Like maybe you were too good at something and that gave them this weird, I'm never going to do that.
Oh yeah.
Right. So like your kids respond in different ways to different stimuli and end up messed up even against your best judgment.
Yep.
And I tell you, I think I've put a fear, like Lindley's like scared of everything. She's very cautious, very cautious child.
Yep.
And then, whatever we did differently, Matthew's the exact opposite. Like he would climb up and jump off the roof. If you let him, and she was telling me like, she's really big into cartwheels and round offs and, she's doing them constantly. Like she leaves the dinner table to go do 3 cartwheels and comes back, and, last night we were like, let's do gymnastics. Like you're really good at this. You've taught yourself to do a one-handed cartwheel. Like how do you even do that? How do you get the bravery to do that? And then she just bawls and she's like, no, I don't want to do gymnastics. And we're just trying to figure out like, why do you not want to do it? Yeah. And come to find out she didn't want to go on a tightrope. She thought she was going to have to go on a tightrope.
She thought gymnastics was the circus. I gotcha.
Like you never know what's going on in their head.
Pit of alligators. Crazy. Yeah, no. Oh, wow. That's crazy.
What? No, you will not have to go on a tightrope.
Yeah, no. There's no
She's like, okay, I'll go this weekend. And I'm like, well, okay. Yeah.
So
all right.
funny.
We went from
so you're signing up for gymnastics this week?
Yeah, we're signing up this week.
All right.
Thanks so much for having me. This was really an honor. I hope that you got some good stuff.
We did. Victoria, so good to have you. And the work you're doing with CPESN and all those other pharmacies does not go, I guess, unrecognized. I know everyone that I've talked to is like, she's going to be great. She's awesome. You were. And we'll send you off being the 2020 Distinguished Young Pharmacist. of Arkansas Pharmacy Association. So,
well, thanks so much.
All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Catalyst Pharmacy Podcast.
If you enjoyed today's episode,
please like, subscribe, and follow us wherever you get your podcast.
Give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts to help us reach more pharmacy professionals like you.